this is Paul Gale from paulgalenetwork.com, and thank you for joining me today for video game sales. It is March 26th, 2022, and in today's video we are going to check out the Japanese hardware and software charts courtesy of Famitsu, which occupied that March 14th through March 20th, 2022 week. To begin, we're going to look at the hardware side of things. The best-selling system of the week was the Nintendo Switch, which sold 85,497 units. In second place was the PlayStation 5, which did 16,968 units. In third was the Xbox Series, selling 3,554 units. In fourth was the Nintendo 3DS, which sold 287 units. And in fifth was the PlayStation 4, which sold 10 units. Overall, it was a pretty good week. The Nintendo Switch had greater than a 15% drop from its previous week, but not too far off from the previous year. PlayStation 5 was neck and neck with last week, if not a little bit better by 700, although, about half off of last year's total. Xbox Series improved by 1,600 over the previous week, and for that matter, over last year. The 3DS and PlayStation 4 were both down again, but not too surprising given how old those two consoles are. The PlayStation 5 Physical Edition was by far the more popular platform than the digital version of PS5, going 14,000 to 3,000 essentially. The Xbox Series X was the more popular than S, selling 2,900 versus Series S's 618. The Nintendo Switch side of things, 55,000 went to OLED, 19,000 to base Nintendo Switch, and 10,000 to the Lite. So a pretty good look. It's going to be interesting to see next week's hardware sales and software sales, particularly because of Kirby and the Forgotten Land, which everybody knows that it's going to be a big selling title, but people don't know yet just how much of a hardware boost is it going to be. That's something that I talk about time and time again on the channel. You figure, well, a lot of people that already want Kirby probably have a Nintendo Switch because they bought it for Super Mario Odyssey or Yoshi's Crafted World, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, games that are within the ballpark of familiarity to Kirby and the Forgotten Land. So, how many new people are going to buy a Nintendo Switch specifically for Kirby? It's not even the first Kirby game on the system, right? However, there could be a fair amount of people that, in addition to the folks that just don't have a system yet, that are going to naturally buy it for the first time, are also, on top of that, people that specifically really want this game, that it really caters to them, right? You don't know just how big of a percentage of people that's going to be compared to how many people are left as potential owners of the system. So I wouldn't be too surprised if next week we see 100,000 Nintendo Switch sales in Japan, but time will tell. It's going to be exciting though. If we look at the software side of things, the best-selling game of the week was the newly released Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin for PlayStation 4 specifically, which did 28,944 copies sold, which is first place, of course, as I just stated, but should be noted it is a pretty low start for a game associated with such a franchise, but we'll get more on that in a bit. In second was Pokemon Legends Arceus for Nintendo Switch, which sold 23,067 copies. Third place went to Elden Ring on PS4. That moved 19,487 units this week. In fourth place was the PlayStation 5 version of Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, which did 17,905 copies. In fifth was Mario Kart 8 Deluxe for Nintendo Switch with a massive 23% increase in sales over the previous week. It did 16,078 copies. In sixth was Minecraft, the Nintendo Switch version, which did 9,755 copies. In seventh was Gran Turismo 7, and it sold 9,447 copies. In eighth was Super Smash Bros. Ultimate for Nintendo Switch, which sold 9,111 copies. In ninth place was Triangle Strategy, still holding on there. Not too bad of a drop, 52% of the previous week's total, and it did 112,107 copies physically. And in 10th was Mario Party Superstars, which didn't really move at all, 0% change essentially, and it sold 8,182 copies. So it's primarily a Nintendo list, but we do have some pretty decent PlayStation representation on there. Gran Turismo 7, only the PS4 version remained in the top 10 this week, and probably next week it'll be out completely. Elden Ring, once again, only the PlayStation 4 version remains in the top 10, but gosh, what a title. Really hang it in there. That's quite strong. But back on that Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin thing, if you look at the combined sales, you're looking at 29,000 plus 18,000. That's really not that much, right? For a game that if it were the main Final Fantasy title, like 16 or something like that, this would be a catastrophic failure. Final Fantasy is, one of the most beloved franchises of all time, a series that has traditionally sold very well in Japan and worldwide. If this was a numbered entry, a main core game, this would be horrible for Square Enix. Fortunately, this is not the case, so it doesn't necessarily represent the fact that, okay, the franchise is dead, there's no interest. No, that's not it. So it's not all that bad, but still being tied to the name Final Fantasy, it being a Final Fantasy game, just very different in its nature. It's an action title that's more comparable to Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, something like that, than a traditional Final Fantasy RPG. I can understand why it's not as big of a seller, but the fact that it didn't gain more interest is kind of unfortunate. Even with digital sales, I could report that it did less than 100,000. It did less than 90,000. It wasn't all that great. You're looking at still a pretty unfortunate first weekend. Digital and physical. It's not like it did great. However, this is also just back east. I imagine that the game did do better in the West. I should have some numbers on that sooner than later, but North America and Europe probably made up for this more poor performance in Japan. Hopefully, Final Fantasy 16, they take their time, and that is a hit, and hopefully the one I can't wait for as well, Final Fantasy VII Remake 2, is just, as amazing as the first one was, which is going to be hard to beat, honestly. Like that first part was amazing. But if they make it specifically with the PS5 in mind, or even if there's a dual release on PS4 and PS5, but they really push the PlayStation 5 version hard, it could be pretty spectacular. But overall, a decent week in terms of software across the charts. Like I said, we had a little bit of evergreen stuff, a couple of surprises, which is always cool, like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe jumping up 23%, a couple of new titles, not bad. Next week's going to be really cool, though, with Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Its Japanese sales alone are going to be explosive. I mean, you're going to look at a few 100,000 seller easily in Japan. I could tell you, and I could have told you for a while, and I think I mentioned this on the channel a few times now, that Kirby and the Forgotten Land was trending to be a 1.5 plus million seller guaranteed opening weekend. It was already passing up any previous Kirby game in terms of pre-orders, both Japan and the United States, and I should say worldwide. However, getting closer to launch, the game looks like 2 million plus is an easy bet. Could it be even higher? Maybe. We've learned some new things with marketing with the Universal Studios City Walk in Hollywood, California set up with targets around the nation, having mouthful mode of Kirby on the big red balls outside the store. The reviews are very strong. It's doing in the mid 80s as a general score. People are enjoying co-op. People are streaming it. It's being talked about, trended on Twitter, and yeah, I personally love it. Like, I know this isn't necessarily review time, but to give my first 2 days worth of impressions, I am thoroughly enjoying the game. I'm playing, a good amount on my own and a good amount cooperatively with my kids and a wife on, multiple accounts. We played through the demo quite a few times as well, and if you liked the demo, you're going to like this, but that much more. So many good soundtracks, so many cool stages. We're only a few worlds in, but already there's a lot of variety. There's a lot of cool mouthful mode techniques, and some things pop up. Great music, gorgeous visuals. Oh man, nothing to complain about. Like the difficulty, the game is not hard, but it's not a walk in the park either. And there's a small challenge to it, but specifically these time-based challenges, fairly easy to complete, but pretty tough in some cases to beat the faster time. Like you almost have to have this perfect sense of how this gameplay works with timing your jumps and so forth. Like, it's pretty cool. Good replay value. If you want to collect all the Waddle Dees and stuff like that, there's definitely incentive to do so. Upgrading your power ups, it's there. It's cool. Like, it's a great game. Yeah, it definitely feels like Kirby's Super Mario Odyssey moment, or maybe his Super Mario 64 moment, because it's the first time he's gone like full 3D. And you can make the argument like, well, you don't have complete 3D navigatable control of the camera, but you can shift it here and there, and it is a 3D game. Uh, but yeah, great stuff. Anyways, like I said, not to be a full review, we're talking video game sales here, but I expect it to be a 2 million plus seller. It could even, like, this is going kind of wild with presumption, but it could top 3 million for all we know, and just really shatter expectations, and right away within one weekend be the second best selling Kirby game of all time, right? I won't go that far, but I do fully expect that it will be, at the end of the day, a 6.5 plus million seller, topping the original Kirby, topping any previous Kirby, and becoming the best selling Kirby game ever. But in its first weekend, or by the 31st, it could get really close and be like the second or third best. And it's good timing too, because Nintendo's quarter financial report will come to us in early May. That finishes up through March 31st, beginning with January 1st, and we'll see just how well Kirby did, and other stuff too, like Metroid Dread and whatnot. So it's going to be exciting. Pokemon Legends Arceus, that'll be in there. Cool stuff. All right, that's going to do it today for Video Game Sales with Gale Network. Thank you, Chris1964 and the InstallBaseForum.com forums for having this nice chart from Famitsu put together, both the hardware and software. I appreciate it. Looks cool as always. And yeah, thank you for joining me today. Hope you all have a good one, and see you next week. Let me know in the comment section below if you're enjoying Kirby and the Forgotten Land, and if not, do you plan on getting it? All right, take it easy. Bye.